Hey kids, I hope you're enjoying some of the warmer weather we're starting to see now, though it's a bit damp today. And I know that some of you are probably just feeling so eager to get out and do something. I just want to go have an adventure. I want to experience something. I'm getting tired of being in the house. I hope even some of you are saying, yeah, I'm bored of video games. Unlikely, but hopefully. So when you can't get out and do stuff, a really great thing to do is to read a good story about an adventure. And so we started a book last summer that I thought might be good to finish reading because we didn't get to finish it in a really good book series. And it's this one here called Prince Martin and the Cave Bear. And so what I'm going to do is each week I'm going to upload a few videos with a few chapters in each video, and we'll get together a few times a week and you can listen to the book as I read it to you. I know some people don't like to read. Well, don't worry. I'll read it to you, and I'll put the pictures in the video as well so you can kind of follow along and see what it's like. Mayhem by Moonlight. The pale moonlight illuminated the little brown bear. He was sniffing for berries, his nose in the air. The cub followed their scent to the depths of the woods. When he finally found them, oh, those berries were good. He gave some to a hedgehog, a skunk, and a hare. They were too small to reach. He was happy to share. Now the forest fell silent. The birds stopped singing. The cub grew uneasy. Could something be wrong? For in summer the nightingale sings in the night. If she suddenly stops, something isn't quite right. The cub stood there and listened and sniffed at the wind. On his ears and his nose, the bear had to depend. A slight shift in the breeze brought a smell to his nose. The bear's heart started pounding and terror arose. He said, "Run!" to the hedgehog, the skunk, and the hare. "You must get away now. You have no time to spare." The cub wanted to flee, but he was sure in a bind, because the day of his birth, this young bear had been blind. Now he stumbled ahead as he tried to escape from what lurked in the shadows, a dark, hulking shape. The shape stepped into the moonlight to follow its prey, the frantic young bear who was running away. If he hadn't been blind, the poor bear would have seen what was following after, so cunning and mean. But the nightingale saw, and it scared her to death. Frozen with fear, the poor bird held her breath. Coming after the cub at a casual pace was a powerful man with blue paint on his face. His blonde beard had been braided. His arms were tattooed. He was strong as an ox. He was one deadly dude. The man bristled with weapons, the tools of his trade. On account of his size, they were all custom made. At his hip he had holstered his clobbering cub, and his hand was a bola to capture the cub. Now the man hurled his bola. It sped through the air. The keen ears of the cub were acutely aware. His pursuer propelled something rushing his way. The cub ran even harder in fear and dismay. But the bola, it struck the blind bear on his feet. The cub tripped and he fell with a moan of defeat. As the moonlight illumined the man who approached, he sneered down at the plight of the cub he had poached. He was Fellman the slaver. He'd captured his prey to enslave and to sell to whomever would pay. Fellman tied up the bear, who was squealing with fear. The cub's cry carried far, and his kinfolk could hear. But the cub wasn't close in his hour of need. Fellman gave a sharp whistle to summon his steed. With a snort, a black horse trotted out of the trees. It went straight to its master, now down on its knees. Fellman muzzled the cub, then he strapped him down tight to the back of the horse, and he rode off in the night. The cub's parents gave chase, calling after their son, but that horse was quite swift and could not be outrun. Fellman soon crossed a river. The bears lost his scent and could not figure out where the kidnapper went. Chapter 1. The circus comes to town. When Prince Martin woke up, he could not help but smile. For this happy young boy had been waiting a while for the day when the circus would come passing through. And today was the day it would make its debut. Horns announced it had come to the kingdom at last. The boy jumped out of bed and he got ready fast. Martin went out and knocked on the door of his guest. She was skimming a book and was already dressed. Upon seeing Prince Martin, the guest was elated. She had risen at dawn and impatiently waited. "You're finally up," she was grinning with a glee. "I'm ready. Let's go. I'm excited. Whoopee!" The young lady named Margaret was royalty too. Her nickname was Meg. She was good through and through. She was younger than Martin by almost a year. She'd be 10 pretty soon, though her birthday was near. The girl lived on an isle in the great western sea, and the queen of that island had given a decree that her daughter, this princess, could sail to the west to go visit her cousin, the one that she likes best. She could stay for 1 month of amusement and fun. Now her month with Prince Martin had barely begun. The kids ran to the kitchen and quickly they ate. Then they raced from the castle and entered the gate of the circus, whose tents had been pitched in the night. With tall tent poles and banners, the colors were bright. The kids mucked out the stables the morning before and had money to spend from that odorous chore. They bought bunches of tickets and made all the rounds. These two cousins enjoyed all the sights and sounds. They saw jesters, and jugglers, and poets, and bards, and kid who had constructed a castle of cards. They saw minstrels and magicians and blind bandoliers. Punch and Judy, the puppets, drew catcalls and jeers. They saw marvelous acrobats, comedy troupes, tiny clowns, mighty strongmen, dogs jumping through hoops. In the shade of the tent, there were pastries for sale. There was cider for children. Adults preferred ale. The pair followed the crowd to a red and white tent, to attend what was billed as the biggest event. A collection of creatures was there on display, from the fields and the forest of lands far away. All these beasts now performed in an animal show. After each of the acts, all the people would throw silver coins on the stage where, according to plan, a trained monkey collected the coins in a can. The show ended at last, and the ringmaster bowed. The man winked at the ladies he liked in the crowd. He was handsome and dashing. His mustache was twirled. The man wore a tall hat, and his cape was unfurled. He sure cut a fine figure and wore his clothes well. Meg and Martin were charmed by the ringmaster's spell. The two cousins now clapped till their hands became sore. They had thrown their last coins, and they wished they had more. They took one final stroll round the circus's grounds. They had seen all the sights now and made all the rounds. Their two bellies were full of much flavorful food. They were tired, but still in a marvelous mood. At the end of this day of amusement and thrills, the kids saw something wicked, which gave them the chills. Chapter 2, A Dirty Deal. It took place right behind that big red and white tent, where those creatures performed and their silver was spent. The two cousins could see 2 grown men and a bear. This poor cub was enslaved, sunken in deep despair. What they witnessed was wrong, such a shadowy deal. It was something the smaller man tried to conceal. With surprise, the kids watched that transaction unfold, as the small fellow bought what the big fellow sold.
60 ounces of silver, a hard bargain price, was the cost of the cub. These two men were not nice. The kids recognized one from the animal show. That was the man with the hat who got people to throw silver coins on the stage for his ape to collect. He had charmed the whole crowd with the greatest effect. Now the other man, he was a sight to behold. His blonde beard had been braided. His blue eyes were cold. The man's cape had been made from the pelt of a moose. The big club he had at his side had seen plenty of use. He had marked it with notches, 36 or more. 'Twas a tally of sorts, a most sinister score. With tattoos on his arms and a scar on his face, it appeared the man came from a warrior race. As the big fellow counted the coins he'd obtained, the ringmaster eyed the young bear he had gained. For this man owned the circus, and fortunes he's made off the beasts he had bought in his animal trade. He would make the bear dance. Foolish peasants would pay. They'd throw coins at his feet, make him money each day. Now the ringmaster said to the bear, "You shall dance. You had better learn quickly to caper and prance." "But I don't want to dance," cried the cub to the man. Now the big man said, "Shush!" and he kicked the cub's pen. Then he said to the ringmaster, "Don't spare the lash," he sneered down at the bear. He was brazen and brash. He's a cave bear, and that means he's bound to grow large. Never let him forget that it's you who's in charge. For there's nothing more deadly, and I must emphasize, than a cave bear who's grown till it's reached its full size. Now the ringmaster fingered his long leather whip, which he always kept handy right there on his hip. "He will not give me trouble," he said with a leer, "for nothing persuades like a good dose of fear." The man cracked his black whip, and it made the bear wince. The blood drained from the faces of Meg and the prince. "I have never acquired a cave bear before. Fellman, get me another. I'd pay a bit more." But the slaver replied, "These are real hard to get. When you're hunting for cave bears, you're facing a threat. You have to get lucky and find one alone and hope that he's far from his bear-ridden home. For those cave bears are social and live in a pack. If you get by their caves, you'd best watch your back. Cave bears live in the north, where it's cold and remote, and you cannot get up there by carriage or boat, and you must not encounter one after your climb, for they hibernate hard for 10 years at a time. So believe what I tell you, the chances are slim of me catching another. Be happy with him." As the two men were talking, Meg started to creep to the cub who was quiet, pretending to sleep. She knelt down and she whispered kind words to the bear. "Will you help me?" he begged, with a sad, sightless stare. Now the ringmaster noticed and uttered an oath. Then he angrily turned and confronted them both. "Get away from my bear. He's not part of the show. This cub hasn't been trained. You kids need to go." Princess Meg was upset and began to protest. She said, "Look, he can talk, and he's sad and distressed. Oh, it's beastly and cruel to keep him a slave. Can't you let him go home with his kith in his cave?" Now at this point I'll mention, in case you don't know, in millennia past, many ages ago, certain beasts could do more than just growl or screech. There were some that were born with the power of speech. But the man wouldn't budge. He had made up his mind. Though this creature could talk, still this bear was born blind. Now the ringmaster spoke, his words dripping with scorn. "This defective young bear should never have been born. He is blind as a bat and unworthy of life. He's now destined for drudgery, service, and strife." Plus, I paid a fair price. He belongs now to me. My bear's none of your business. You kids let him be. The young princess now offered to trade for the bear, as she lifted her crown from her golden red hair. This is all that I've got. It's a very fair deal. It's gilded with gold, and the ruby is real. Now the ringmaster priced the girl's crown at a glance, but it wasn't worth more than a bear that could dance. In a matter of months, he was sure he would clear a lot more than he paid. And then year after year, he would fill up his coffers with coins that peasants threw. He'd retire by the sea, buy a home with a view. So the ringmaster said he would not make the trade. He had made up his mind, and now couldn't be swayed. She was very upset, and her voice was a quaver. It was then Prince Meg was provoked by the slaver.
What will Martin and Meg do? What is it that gets Meg so upset? You'll have to tune in a few days' time when I read a few more chapters of Prince Martin and the Cave Bear. See you then.